Hello and welcome to Lily de Silva, Lesson 9, translation from English into Pali, and this time we'll be doing the enhanced version. This is the first enhanced version that I will have done, or that I am doing, in Lily de Silva, so bear with me if it's a little bit choppy and clunky. Essentially the idea here is to give you a much more gradual sentence build-up, rather than all of the other translation lessons so far. I've given you read out the sentence in Pali or English, then a pause, and then read out the translation. In this one, we'll be building it up bit by bit with pauses for you to try to get it yourself and build the sentence up yourself rather than wait until the end. And as before, do your best to treat this as a purely oral thing, just listening. But if you need to have the text in front of you, okay, fine. So we will start. Go to camera only. So we're on lesson 9, exercise 5, at the beginning of page 35 in the printed book. So translate into Pali is number 1 now. Having gone out of the house, the farmer enters the field. Now, building it up bit by bit. Farmer is kasako. The farmer goes out is nikamati. Nikamati. And it goes out of something, that's the ablative. So geha is house. So he leaves the house, you'd use the ablative, it's geha nikamati. Now we've had numerous times, there are alternative forms of the ablative for the short a declension that we've been studying. Geha, gehemha, gehesma. I won't repeat all three each time. If we use one of them, just know that the other two are equally correct. I will, however, be drawing attention to cases where we have two alternative forms that don't follow an absolutely regular pattern, like geha, gehemha, gehesma follow a regular pattern. But as we'll see in a moment, having gone out, it can be nikama or nikamitva, so I will draw attention to those. So the farmer leaves the house then, just using a finite verb. He leaves, he goes out, is kasako geha nikamati. The farmer enters the field, kasako ketam pavisati. Now to say he goes out of the house and enters the field, you could say geha nikamati ketancha pavisati. Just does A and B. Or you could put the cha after the pavisati. Geha nikamati. How do you say then? And enters the field. Ketam pavisati cha. However, as we've already learnt, far more common in Pali and Sanskrit as well, and better style, is if it's a sequence of verbs, put the first one in the absolutive form. So now we have the farmer having left the house. Kasaku geha nikamma. Or instead of nikamma, you can also say nikamitva. So kasaku geha nikamitva enters the field. Ketam pavisati. So I'll say this entire sentence again now. Kasaku geha nikamma ketam pavisati. And in the alternative form, kasaku geha nikamitva ketam pavisati. Number 2, having preached the doctrine, the Buddha enters the monastery. And of course, in English, we could equally well say the Buddha preaches the doctrine, then enters the monastery. Might be more usual to say that in English. So, he preaches the doctrine. Doctrine, nominative Dhammo, and so the accusative Dhammam. He preaches deseti. So he preaches the doctrine is Dhamman deseti. The Buddha preaches the doctrine, Buddho Dhamman deseti. And the absolutive of deseti, it's the same for the majority, maybe even all, but certainly the great majority of verbs ending in eti rather than ati. You make the absolutive in etwa, deseti, desetwa, deseti, desetwa. Notice that the e before the twa is shortened somewhat because it's a consonant cluster. So it's not desetwa, but desetwa. So the Buddha, having preached the doctrine, Buddho Dhamman desetwa, enters the monastery. Viharam pavisati. So we'll do the entire sentence again now. Buddho Dhamman desetva viharam pavisati. And once more. Buddho Dhamman desetva viharam pavisati. Number 3. In English, the king, having been pleased with the Buddha, abandons the palace and goes to the monastery. In English, more natural to say, the king was pleased with the Buddha, and so the king is pleased with the Buddha, has been pleased with the Buddha, and so abandons the palace and goes to the monastery. So here, remember, we've got 3 verbs, having been pleased, abandons, and goes. It's a string of 3, so only the last one needs to be a finite verb. By finite, in case you hadn't got it, I mean it's a verb actually with person and number and tense, rather than the absolutive ending in twa, which is indeclinable and can apply to anybody in any tense. So the king, having been pleased with the Buddha. So if you are pleased with somebody, he is pleased, it is pasidati. And it takes the locative. If you are pleased with somebody or something, it takes the locative of what you're pleased with. So the Buddha then goes in the locative. He is pleased with the Buddha. So buddhe pasidati. So the king is pleased with the Buddha. So bhupalo buddhe pasidati. He abandons the palace. So he abandons is pajahati from the root ha. Remember, it's a reduplicating root, so you don't say hati, but jahati, like he gives, not dati, but dadati, and so on. From pa, you have pibati, these reduplicating roots. So jahati, he leaves, he abandons. Much more common to, the verb can be used on its own, but it's far more common to use it in essentially the same meaning with the verbal prefix Sanskrit pra, Pali pa. So pajahati means he abandons. So the king is pleased with the Buddha. Say that now with a finite verb. Bhupalo buddhe pasidati. He abandons the palace. Pasadam pajahati. he goes to the monastery. So vihara, of course, we know that word, and with the accusative of motion, he goes to the monastery, viharam gacchati. Now, pasidati, the absolutive of that, having been pleased, is to change the ati to itva, pasiditva. And pajahati, he abandons, having abandoned, becomes pajahitva. So the Buddha being pleased, the king, being pleased with the Buddha is bhupalo buddhe pasiditva. Having abandoned the palace, pasadam pajahitva, enters the monastery. Goes to the monastery, viharam gacchati. Now the whole sentence. Bhupalo buddhe pasiditva pasadam pajahitva viharam gacchati. And once more. Bhupalo buddhe pasiditva pasadam pajahitva viharam gacchati. Now, for the Sanskritists among you, remember, of course, that forms like pasiditva and pajahitva are not allowed in Sanskrit because the twa endings can occur only with the bare root, not with a root prefixed, with a verbal prefix, as in pasidati and pajahati. So in Sanskrit, instead of pasiditva, it's prasad in Sanskrit. So it's just in Sanskrit, prasadya. You have the ya instead of the twa, prasadya. And pajahitva in Sanskrit, praha, root ha, praha, to abandon. And so having abandoned is prahaya. Now back to the Pali. Having climbed down from the stairway, the child laughs. Actually, it's probably me, but it's more accurate in English, saying having come down the stairs. So, having come down the stairs, the child laughs. So the child, Darako, now, sopana is the stairs. So with the verb uruhati, which is either to descend from a tree or to come down the stairs, any kind of descending, that takes the ablative. So literally you come down from the stairs. So the child comes down the stairs with a finite verb is darako sopanamha or sopana uruhati. Now remember here with the absolutive form, it's not uruhya, but there's the metathesis, that's the transposition of the Y and the H. So it's uruiha, and laughs hasati. So the child, Darako, having come down the stairs, sopanamha or sopana uruiha, markwal uruiha hasati. Darako sopanamha uruiha hasati. You can put the darako, the main verb, as the subject of the sentence, before the finite verb at the end. So it's equally correct to say sopanamha uruiha darako hasati. Just as in English we can say, the child, having come down the stairs, laughs. Also, having come down the stairs, the child laughs. So in Pali, as in English, you can say either. It's probably a bit more normal to put the subject at the very beginning of the sentence here, but by no means mandatory, and it'll often be a balance of, often a question of sentence balance and style. There's no actual grammatical rule about it. I'd say the only grammatical rule is that they're both correct. Number 5, having hit the serpent with a stone, the boy runs into the house. The boy here is Kumaro. To hit is Paharati, so, and serpent is Sappo in the nominative. In fact, in Sanskrit, Sarpa, Latin serpens, English serpent. So the boy hits the snake. Kumaro Sappam Paharati. The boy hits the snake with a stone. So pasana, stone. With a stone, instrumental, pasanena. So the boy hits the snake with a stone. In Pali, the better order would be the boy with a stone the snake hits. So it goes Kumaro pasanena sappam paharati. And he runs to the house, accusative of motion. So dhavati, he runs. He runs to the house, gehan dhavati. Now changing paharati to the absolutive, that becomes paharitva. So the boy, having hit the snake with the stone, Kumaro pasanena sappam paharitva, runs to the house, geham dhavati. I'll read that sentence again. Kumaro pasanena sappam paharitva, gehan dhavati. Kumaro pasanena sappam paharitva, gehan dhavati. Number 6, having gone to the forest, the man climbs a tree and eats fruits. And again, we have 3 verbs here in a sequence, so the first 2 can go into the absolutive. But breaking it down first, the man goes to the forest. Puriso, again, we won't bother with the alternatives. We know it's Puriso, Manuso, or Naro, any of them. So Puriso aranyam gacchati. The man goes to the forest. He climbs a tree, rukkam aruhati. He eats fruits, palani bunjati, or khadati. Now changing these finite verbs, gacchati and aruhati, into absolutives. Gacchati is gantwa. Remember the m of the root, gum changes to an n before a t, so gantwa, having gone. Aruhati, opposite of uruhati, down, Sanskrit ava ruhati, Pali uruhati. So he climbs, the a is the opposite of the ava here, so he climbs aruhati, and the absolutive, remembering the metathesis, that's the switching of the y and the h, is aruiha, so gantva and aruiha. So the man, having gone to the forest, is Puriso aranyam gantva, having climbed a tree, rukkam aruiha eats fruits, palani bunjati, or palani khadati. So the whole sentence now. Puriso aranyam gantva rukkam aruiha palani bunjati. And again. Puriso aranyam gantva rukkam aruiha palani bunjati. Number 7. Having washed the clothes in the water, the washerman brings them home. So he washes dhovati. Clothes is vatani, singular vatam, neuter noun, plural vatani. As we've discussed before, it's cognate. It's vastrani in Sanskrit, and it's cognate with vest as in vestments. And the Italian for clothes, vestiti. Spanish, vestidos, that same vastra in Sanskrit. So he washes the clothes is vatani dhovati. He washes the clothes with water, udaka, water, with water, the clothes he washes, literally. So udakena vatani dhovati. The washerman brings them to the house, brings them home. Rajako geham aharati, to bring, paharati to strike, viharati to dwell, aharati to bring. So the washerman brings them home. Them, as the neuter plural would be tani, but where it's clearly understood what we're talking about, you don't need to express that pronoun. So you could say the washerman brings them home, Rajako tani gehem aharati, or just Rajako gehem aharati. In English, of course, you'd have to put in the pronoun. It would sound wrong if you didn't. So, dhovati he washes, and the absolutive is dhovitva. So, having washed the clothes, vatani dhovitva. So, having washed the clothes with water, put with water first. Udakena vatani dhovitva. The washerman takes them home, or brings them home. Rajako gehem aharati. Now the entire sentence. Udakena vatani dhovitva, Rajako gehem aharati. And as we've discussed, this Rajako could also appear at the beginning of the sentence equally correctly. So the alternative form would be Rajako udakena vatani dhovitva gehem aharati, or tani gehem aharati, optional whether you put it in or not. I'll read it once more. Rajako udakena vatani dhovitva tani gehem aharati. Number 8. The lion, having killed a goat, eats having sat on a rock. In English, more normal to say, the lion kills the goat, sits down on a rock, and eats it. So the lion, siho, he kills hanati, he kills a goat, ajjan hanati. So if the lion kills the goat, siho ajan hanati. He sits on a rock, he sits down, is nisidati, and a rock, pasana, so he sits on a rock, pasane or pasanasmin nisidati, and he eats it, kadati. So siho ajam hanati, now put that in the absolutive, the lion having killed a goat. Siho ajam hantwa, having sat on a rock, pasanasmin nisiditwa, eats it. You can just say eats, leaving out the it. Kadati. So I'll read the whole sentence. Siho ajanhantva pasanasmin nisiditva kadati. Again, siho ajanhantva pasanasmin nisiditva kadati. Or bhunjati, equally correct. Number 9. The doctor, having seen the merchants, plural, goods, leaves the city. In English, the doctor sees the merchant's goods and leaves the city would be more normal. So the doctor sees is vejo passati. The doctor sees the goods, vejo bandani passati. The merchant's good, the merchant is varnija. So merchants in the plural of the merchants is varnijanam. The merchant's goods is varnijanam bandani. He sees the merchant's goods, varnijanam bandani passati. The doctor sees the merchant's goods, vejo varnijanam bandani passati. He leaves town, leaves the city. Leaves, literally steps out. Nikkamati, takes the ablative, remember. So nagara or nagaramha nikkamati. Now passati, he sees. Having seen is passitva, or, remember this is the verb that has two roots. The pure root is the root Sanskrit drish, from drish, but the present pashyati in Sanskrit, and in Pali the root this. Having seen is in Pali disva, so disva and pasitva have exactly the same meaning, both are equally correct. In Sanskrit only drishtva would be allowed, drishtva, Pali disva. So the doctor, having seen the merchant's goods, leaves the city. So vejo varnijanam bandani passitva nagaramha nikkamati. And I'll say it again using the alternative form instead of passitva. It's vejo varnijanam bandani disva nagaramha nikkamati. And there's no distinction of meaning at all between passitva and disva. Number 10. Having broken into the house, thieves run into the forest. And in Pali you can just say having broken the house. Doesn't mean they've destroyed the entire thing, doesn't mean they've broken into the house. So he breaks into the house is from the root bid, and this is one that has an inserted nasal, so it's not bidati but bhindati. So he breaks into the house is geham bhindati. The thief breaks into the house, choro geham bhindati. And the thieves break into the house is chora geham bhindanti. So the absolutive from bhid in Pali, it's formed from the present stem, so bhindati, bhinditva, which you wouldn't do in Sanskrit. So having broken into the house, geham bhinditva, the thieves run to the forest. Chora aranyan dhavanti. I'll say it again now. Geham bhinditva chora aranyan dhavanti. Geham bhinditva chora aranyan dhavanti. Number 11. Having roamed in the field, the pig falls into a pit. So to roam, ahindati. Ahindati. So the pig, several words for pig, let's use sukaro. So the pig roams, sukaro ahindati. The pig roams in the field. Sukaro kette ahindati. So he falls into a pit. He falls, patati, from the root pat, patati. A pit is avarta, falls into a pit, use the locative here. Avartasmim or avartam he, so avarte. So he falls into a pit, avartasmim patati. So he roams, ahindati, and the absolutive form is ahinditva, having roamed. So the pig having roamed in the field, sukaro kette ahinditva, falls into a pit, avartasmim patati. Another whole sentence. Sukaro kette ahinditva avartasmim patati. Sukaro kette ahinditva avartasmim patati. Number 12. We don't have an absolutive in this one. The fisherman brings fish from the sea for farmers. So fisherman, divaro, brings aharati, brings fish, mache aharati. He brings fish for farmers. Kasakanam, remember kasako, for farmers, use the dative, genitive, plural, kasakanam, aharati. He brings the fish from the sea. Samuddamaha mache aharati. And dhivaro, the fisherman. So now the whole sentence. The fisherman for the farmers from the sea, fish brings. That's how you put it in Pali. Dhivaro kasakanam samuddamaha mache aharati. And once more. Dhivaro kasakanam samuddamaha mache aharati. Number 13. Having taken goods from the city, the teacher comes home. So, Acharyo, the teacher comes, Acharyo agachati, the teacher comes home, Acharyo geham agachati. So, he takes is adadati or adati, and the absolutive adaya. So, having taken adaya, having taken goods, bhandani adaya, having taken goods from the city, nagaramha bhandani adaya. So, having taken goods from the city, the teacher comes home, nagaramha bhandani adaya, acharyo geham agachati. Nagaramha bhandani adaya, acharyo geham agachati. Number 14. Having stood on a mountain, the hunter shoots birds with arrows. Of course, here it means not that he stands on the mountain and stops standing there, goes somewhere else. He's remaining standing. Having put himself there, standing on the mountain, he shoots. So, Pabbata, mountain, he stands on the mountain. Pabbatasmim tittati. Remember, this is another reduplicating verb. Sanskrit root sta, present tishtati, which becomes in Pali tittati. He stands on the mountain, pabbasmim tittati. The absolutive is tattva. In Sanskrit, actually, it's stitva. In Pali, tattva. So, having stood on the mountain is pabbatasmin tattva. The hunter shoots, luddako vijhati. He shoots birds, luddako sakune vijhati. He shoots birds with arrows. Arrows sara, instrumental plural, sarehi. So the hunter shoots birds with arrows is luddako sarehi sakune vijhati. So standing on the mountain, okay, in Pali having stood, in English standing on the mountain, the hunter shoots birds with arrows, becomes pabbatasmin tatva, pabbatasmin tatva, luddako sarehi sakune vijhati. And again, pabbatasmin tatva, luddako sarehi sakune vijhati. Number 15. The oxen, having eaten grass in the park, sleep on the road. So the oxen is the ngona. The oxen eat grass, ngona tinang khadanti. They eat grass in the park. The park is uyyana. In Sanskrit is udyana. In Pali it becomes uyyana. So they eat grass in the park. Uyyane tinang khadanti. And the oxen sleep in the road. The oxen sleep is ngona sayanti, literally lie down, but used to mean sleep. Ngona sayanti. The oxen sleep in the road. Ngona magge sayanti. So now, having eaten grass in the park, the oxen sleep on the road, is uyyane tinam khaditva Guna magge sayanti. Uyyane dinam khaditva guna magge sayanti. Number 16. The king, having got down from the chariot, speaks with the farmers, or as we'd say, the king dismounts from his chariot and speaks with the farmers. So he dismounts, he gets down. Uruhati. Chariot is ratha. Remember, cognate with the Latin rota, meaning a wheel, modern Italian ruota, and in English, to act like a wheel, rotate, rotary, a rota, that same word. So rata then originally just means a wheel, but more commonly chakra, but rata then comes to mean mostly chariot in Sanskrit and Pali. So he gets down from the chariot, he dismounts from the chariot, is rata or ratamaha uruhati. The king dismounts from the chariot, bhupalo ratamaha uruhati. He speaks with the farmers. He speaks bhasati. With the farmers, instrumental plural, kasakehi saddhim. So he speaks with the farmers, kasakehi saddhim bhasati. So now the king, having got down from the chariot, bhupalo ratamha uruyha, remember the metathesis, not uruhya, in Sanskrit would be avaruhya, in Pali uruyha. So ratamha uruyha kasakehi saddhim bhasati. And again, bhupalo ratamha uruyha kasakehi saddhim bhasati. Number 17. The man, having given up his house, enters the monastery, or the man gives up his house and enters the monastery. So he enters the monastery, viharam pavisati. The man enters the monastery, puriso viharam pavisati. He abandons the house, geham pajahati. Now, Pali will allow two forms for the absolutive. There is the one that more closely follows the Sanskrit, which is pahaya, in Sanskrit prahaya, or a form that's not allowed in Sanskrit, pajahitva. So the man, having left his house, puriso geham pahaya, or puriso geham pajahitva viharam pavisati. So I'll read that again once with each form of the absolutive. Puriso geham pahaya viharam pavisati. Or puriso geham pajahitva viharam pavisati. Number 18. Fishermen give fish to merchants and receive profits. The fishermen, divara, the fishermen receive profits. So they receive labhanti. And a common word for profit, not the only one, but a common word for profit, is formed from that same root. So labhati, he receives, labha, what one receives, what you gain. So they receive profits, they make profits, is labham labhanti. So the fishermen make profits, divara labham labhanti. So the fishermen give fish. Divra mache dadanti, and the absolutive is datva. So the fishermen, having given fish, is divra mache datva labham labhanti. And to the merchants, vanijanam. So the fishermen, having given fish to the merchants, divra vanijanam mache datva labham labhanti. I'll say it again. Divara vanijanam mache datva labham labhanti. Now, you'll often find in Pali and Sanskrit where you have this absolutive in a sequence of verbs. The first verb, can also have a causative or an instrumental sense, in the sense of the fishermen make profits by giving fish to the merchants, or make a profit by selling fish. So in such a case you can use the absolutive, but it will, depending on context, often have this meaning of they achieve that object by doing so and so. So divara vanijanam mache datva labham labhanti. Number 19. The lay devotee, having asked a question of the monk, sits on his seat. Or in more normal English, the lay devotee asks the monk a question and sits on his seat. And remember, when you ask somebody a question, the verb he asks is pachati, puchati. The question asks a question, that's in the accusative, panham puchati. And the person you're asking a question goes in the ablative. So literally you ask a question from somebody. English, you ask somebody a question. In Pali, you ask a question from somebody. So upasako samanamha panyam puchati. And he sits on the seat, on his seat. And you say his, remember, just he sits on the seat, his seat. Asane nisidati. Now, pucheti, he asks, the absolutive puchitva. So the lay devotee asks the monk a question and sits on his seat. Upasako samanam ha panyam puchitva asane nisidati. I'll say it again. Upasako samanamha panyam puchitva asane nisidati. Number 20. The disciples of the Buddha, having seen the wicked men, admonish, well, we would say admonish them in English, but you don't have to put in the them if it's obvious that it's admonish them. So the disciples, the savaka, shravaka in Sanskrit, savaka, the disciples of the Buddha, the buddhasa savaka, wicked men, in Pali you can say the ungood men, so an ungood man is or in Sanskrit asat purusha, in Pali asapurisa. Remember, Sanskrit purusha with the ru, Pali purisa, the ru becomes a re. Purusha, Sanskrit purisa, Pali. So having seen the bad men, the wicked men, asapurise, accusative plural, asapurise disva anusasanti. As an alternative to disva, having seen, as we saw in an earlier sentence, you can also have pasitva, with no difference of meaning. A Pali writer or speaker with more of a classical Sanskritic sense would tend to avoid a form like pasitva and would prefer a form like disva, though in ordinary Pali both are entirely acceptable. So the Buddha's disciples see the wicked men and admonish them. So buddhassa savaka asapurise disva anusasanti. You could also have te anusasanti, admonish them. Once more, buddhassa savaka asapurise disva anusasanti. Actually, anusasanti is given as admonish in the key. It's more is more teach, or vadanti is more admonish. To talk down, you give somebody a talking to, a telling off, or vadanti. So if it's admonishing or telling them off, admonish, I suppose, could be either. Anusasati is more just to give teaching. Number 21. The Brahmin, having scolded the child, hits him. So the Brahmano, hits the child. Darakam paharati. Now, to scold or be abusive towards somebody, remember this verb kusati, to call, or cognate with our English croak, krosh in Sanskrit, krag in Greek, croak in English. So if you shout at, it's in Sanskrit akroshati, Pali akosati, and remember, different from Sanskrit prakroshati, Pali pakosati, which simply means to call, nothing nasty there at all. Pakosati, you call somebody. But if you scold or abuse somebody, akosati. And the absolute is akusitva. So the Brahmin scolds the child and hits him. Or you could say literally in Pali, the Brahmin, having scolded the child, hits, obviously, who is hitting, so you don't need to say him. Brahmano tarakam akusitva paharati. You could say akusitva tam paharati, hits him. Again, Brahmano darakam akusitva paharati. Number 22. The deities, the gods, having asked questions of the Buddha, become glad. So the gods become glad, the deities become glad. Deva singular, deva plural, the gods become glad. Deva pasidanti. So the gods ask questions. Deva panhe puchanti. Now from puchanti, the absolutive is puchitva. So the gods, having asked questions, are glad. Deva panhe puchitva pasidanti. And the gods, having asked the Buddha questions, become glad. Remember, you ask the Buddha questions in Pali. The Buddha here would go in the ablative. So Deva Buddha Panhe Puchitva Pasidanti. Once more. Deva buddhamha panye pachitva pasidanti. 23. The dog, having bitten the teacher's foot, runs into the house. Or more normal English, the dog bites the teacher's foot and runs into the house. So, kukuro, a dog. No, dasati, he bites, and the absolutive is dasitva, dasati, dasitva. Runs into the house, runs to the house and runs into the house. You say about the same in Pali. Both would be geham dhahavati. So the dog runs to the house or runs into the house is kukuro geham dhahavati. So the dog bites the foot. Kukuro padan dasati. The dog bites the teacher's foot. Kukuro acharyasa padan dasati. The dog, having bitten the teacher's foot, kukuro acharyasa padan dasitva, runs into the house. Geham dhavati. So the whole sentence now. Kukuro acharyasa padan dasitva, geham dhavati. And again, kukuro acharyasa padam dasitva, geham dhavati. Number 24. The monkey, having played with the goat on the road, climbs a tree. Or just the monkey plays with the goat in the road and then climbs a tree. So, the monkey climbs a tree. Makato vanaro rukkam aruhati. So he plays with the goat. He plays kirlati, and the absolute of kirlitwa, kirlati. So he plays in the road. Mage kirlati. He plays with a goat. Ajena sadim kirlati. Remember, you wouldn't use just the simple instrumental on its own, ajena kirlati, because that would suggest that he was using the goat as a plaything. You know, like he played with his toy, for example. You'd use the straight instrumental there. But here, the idea he's playing in conjunction with the goat, you know, along with the goat playing. Just as I've given you the distinction before, you walk with a friend, that's mittena saddhim, or mittena saha, as you're in the company of a friend. But if you're walking with a stick, you say dandena charati. You wouldn't say dandena saha charati. That would suggest you're walking in the sticks, walking along next to you, which means you're using a stick to walk. Dandena charati. So here he's clearly playing with the goat, enjoying a game with the goat. So it's ajena saddhim. So the monkey, having played with the goat in the road, so the monkey with the goat in the road, having played, so makato ajena saddhim magge kilitva, climbs the tree. Rukkam aruhati. And again, makato ajena saddhim magge kilitva, rukkam aruhati. 25. The hermit, having come from the forest, receives a cloth from the good man. Now, vattam here is probably meant to mean an item of clothing. Anyway, it's vatam. We recently, a few lines ago, had the plural vatani, clothes. This is vatam, a single garment. So tapaso, the hermit, comes from the forest. Aranyamha or aranya agachati. So he receives a garment from the good man. So he receives a garment, vatam labhati, from the good man. We had wicked men before. Asapurisa was the wicked man. This is just sapuriso is the good man. From the good man, in the ablative then, sapurisamha or sapurisa. He receives the garment from the good man. Sapurisamha vatam labhati. The hermit comes from the forest. Tapaso aranyamha agama. It's more the ascetic than the hermit. So the tapaso aranyamha agachati. Having come, remember two forms in Pali, agamma or agantva. And which is the only permissible one in Sanskrit? Is agamya, because of the verbal prefix. As I've said several times now, in Pali you're allowed to say agantva, which is you can't do in Sanskrit. So you can have either agamma, from the Sanskrit agamya, Pali agamma. So the ascetic or the hermit, having come from the forest, receives the garment from the good man. Tapaso aranyamha agamma or agantva. Sapurisamha vatam labhati. And again, with a different form this time. Tapaso aranyamha agantva sapurisamha vatam labhati. 26. Having drunk water, the child breaks the bowl. So bowl is the pattam. He breaks the bowl. Pattam bindati. Remember, bid with an inserted nasal in this root. Bid bindati. From that same bid, the verbal noun is bheda, meaning splitting. And there's the offence, the ecclesiastical offence of splitting the sangha. That's sangha bheda, causing a split or a schism in the sangha. So here, it means break or split. So he breaks the bowl, pattam bhindati. The child breaks the bowl. Darako pattam bhindati. So the child drinks water. Darako udakam pivati. But having drunk is udakam pivitva. So the child having drunk water breaks the bowl. Darako udakam pivitva pattam bhindati. And once more. Darako udakam pivitva pattam bhindati. Number 27. Having advised the farmer's sons, and having risen from the seats, the monks go to the monastery. So, the monks admonish the sons, samana putte uvadanti. The farmer's plural sons, kasakanam putte. So the monks advise the farmer's sons, samana kasakanam putte uvadanti. Then they get up from their seats. Remember, Asanam, singular, is a seat. Same as the yoga asana. This means a sitting. This is the ablative plural, same as the instrumental plural in Pali, but not Sanskrit. Asanehi, from the seats, from their seats. Uttahitva, they get up as uttahanti, Sanskrit uttishtanti, Pali uttahanti, absolutive uttahitva. So uttahanti, uttahitva. So they get up from their seats, asanehi uttahanti, having got up from their seats, asanehi uttahitva, they go to the monastery, viharang gachanti. So, the whole sentence now, the monks, having advised the farmer's sons, samana kasakanam putte ovaditva, having got up from their seats, asanehi uttahitva, go to the monastery, viharang gachanti. Now the whole sentence, samana kasakanam putte ovaditva, asanehi uttahitva, viharang gachanti. And again, samana kasakanam putte ovaditva, asanehi uttahitva, viharang gachanti. The sailor, having crossed the sea, goes to the island. The sailor, navico, and remember, cognate of the Latin navis for ship and nautical, so navico, the sailor. The sailor crosses the sea. Navico samuddam tarati. Remember, crosses down, avatarati, from which we get avatara, avatar, meaning crossing down. Just crossing is tarati, absolutive taritva. So the sailor crosses the sea, navico samuddam tarati, goes to the island, dipangachati. So now the sailor, having crossed the sea, goes to the island, navico samuddam taritva dipangachati. And again, navico samuddam taritva dipangachati. 29. The child calls the uncles and dances in the house. So the child calls his uncles. Darako matule pakkosati. Remember, not akkosati, which means he abuses his uncles. It's pakkosati, calls his uncles. Darako matule pakkosati. And dances in the house. Gehe nacheti. So pakkosati, just as we akkosati, akkositva, pakkosati, pakkositva. So the child, having called his uncles, darako matule pakkositva, dances in the house. Gehe nacheti. Again, darako matule pakkositva, gehe nacheti. And once more, darako matule pakkositva, gehe nacheti. Number 30. Having washed clothes and bathed, the farmer gets out of the water. So he washes clothes, he washes dhovati, he bathes nahayati, he washes clothes vatani dhovati, he washes clothes and bathes. We would say in Pali, having washed clothes, he bathes, which is vatani dhovitva nahayati. Kasako, sorry, the farmer gets out of the water. Kasako udakamha uttarati. I'll note here, tarati, you see, cross, this ut, the idea of cognate without, but also means up and out. So when you get out of the water, emerge from the water, in Pali Sanskrit, it's like crossing up. So you go down into the water, uttarati in Sanskrit, avatarati, cross down. In Pali, you cross up, uttarati. So the farmer, and ablative, of course, from the water. So the farmer emerges from the water, the farmer comes out of the water. Kasako udakamha uttarati. So now the farmer, having washed his clothes and having bathed, emerges from the water, gets out of the water. Vatani dhovitva nahayitva kasako udakamha uttarati. And as we know, the kasako here is put before the main clause, the kasako udakamha uttarati, but the kasako is allowed to go at the beginning of the sentence. So I'll read it in that alternative way now. Kasako vatani dhovitva nahayitva udakamha uttarati. Once more. Vatani dhovitva nahayitva kasako udakamha uttarati. And that concludes this translation exercise.